For more than 110 years, the Panama Canal has connected the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Each year, nearly 300 million tons of cargo squeeze through this narrow canal. It's an 82-kilometer shortcut that speeds up a ship's journey by more than 2 weeks. But have you ever wondered how the Panama Canal actually works? From the insane construction that cost more than 25,000 humans their lives to the genius engineering of its lock systems and the plans for future expansion. Hey, I'm Luis, and in this video we're taking a deep look at one of the most important mega projects in human history. Real quick, we spent dozens of hours visualizing everything in 3D, so this is not AI generated. Let's start with the history of the Panama Canal. The idea of a water passage between the Atlantic and Pacific has been around since the Spanish came to Central America. This stretch of land gets as narrow as 50 kilometers, so it's a natural idea to think of, but not easy to achieve. Throughout the 19th century, governments around the world considered canals that would have cut through Nicaragua, Mexico and Panama. When the Suez Canal opened in Egypt in 1869, it proved the feasibility of cutting long sea routes through land. And the very same French engineer who pulled off Suez, Ferdinand de Lesseps, thought he could repeat his success in Panama. But this landscape had a unique challenge: the Chagres River. It's right at the narrowest point of Panama, exactly where you'd want to build a canal. And during the rainy season, it became a raging flood flowing to the Atlantic. But after 9 years of building and 25,000 deaths from accidents and tropical diseases, the French effort to build a canal went bankrupt. When the Americans took over in 1904, they took a different approach. Instead of fighting the Chagres River, they would harness its energy. They designed a genius lock system, raising ships up from sea level, letting them cross a massive artificial lake and then lowering them back down on the other side. The first step and key element to this design would be damming the river and making it the centerpiece of the canal. But this was not just any dam. The Chagres River needed to be turned into the largest man-made lake in the world. So engineers began drawing up plans for the massive Gatún Dam. Some of them wanted to build it as a concrete wall, but the soft and tropical soil made for an unstable foundation. So instead, they built a massive earth-fill dam, packed with sand, rock and a watertight clay core. And here's how. They built 2 railroads across the Chagres River Valley. Then they dumped rock from the trains to pile 2 giant ridges over 1,200 meters apart. The space between these rock walls became the thickness of the dam. Builders pumped in millions of cubic meters of a mix of rock, clay and earth, all dumped layer by layer and compacted under its own weight. Eventually, the water drained out and the earthen core remained. It was then all covered with dry-fill dirt to raise the dam to the correct height. Over 17 million cubic meters of rock and earth were used to build the dam. And when it was finished, Gatún Dam stood 32 meters tall and stretched 2.5 kilometers. It took months for the water to backfill, but eventually the Chagres River Valley became Gatún Lake. At the time, it was the largest artificial lake in the world. Now, to turn things into a functioning canal, engineers started working on step 2. And this step nearly broke the project: the Culebra cut. It had to be carved through 14 kilometers of mountain range. That was more than 100 meters high. Workers started digging through solid rock and unstable clay. Heavy rains turned clay into slippery mud, and the sides of the cut kept collapsing. Major landslides were common. In fact, over the course of the construction of the Panama Canal, builders excavated an extra 40 million cubic meters of earth because of landslides. The landslides fundamentally changed the project. Builders had to excavate the Culebra cut 1.5 times wider at the bottom than they had originally planned, just to make the slopes gentle enough to prevent more landslides. Despite rising project costs, nearly $12 billion in today's money, builders kept going, and they eventually succeeded. Now for step 3, the massive locks, I will first explain how the Panama Canal actually works. And before that, quick thanks to our long-term partner CyberGhost VPN for making this complex video even possible. I spoke about CyberGhost many times before, and you probably know how it works by now. I've been using it for over a year while working on videos at home or while traveling. It's just nice knowing that my data isn't being tracked or sold. CyberGhost has over 38 million users and an excellent rating on Trustpilot. The best thing about CyberGhost is that you can use it on up to 7 devices at the same time. So I've got it on my laptop and my phone, but you could even share it with family and friends. And it also lets me watch content that might normally be blocked where I live. It's really simple to use. You can either pick from over 100 countries yourself or just let it choose the best location for you. Then you just hit this button and that's it. This way, all your traffic is encrypted and rerouted through their secure servers, so no one can see your activity. You also get up to 40% more content from your streaming platform and even better deals online. Right now, you can get 84% off plus 4 whole months for free. And they even have a 45-day money-back guarantee, so you can literally just try it risk-free and see if you like it or not. Check them out at cyberghostvpn.com/megabuilds or use our link in the description. Now, let me explain how the Panama Canal actually works. Think of it like a water staircase. Ships enter at sea level, go up several steps to Lake Gatún, cross it, and then go back to sea level on the other side. Each step is what's called a lock, and within that lock, canal operators raise or lower the water level to move the ship up or down. So it's actually more like a series of water elevators than like a staircase, but you get the idea. On the Atlantic side, 3 locks raise ships 26 meters to Gatún Lake. Ships then cross the lake and move over to the Pacific side. First, the Pedro Miguel lock lowers ships 9 meters to Miraflores Lake. Then, 2 more locks at Miraflores lower them the final 17 meters to the Pacific Ocean. Well, actually 17 meters is only the average distance down to the Pacific, as it changes radically with the tides and seasons. That's because the Pacific has bigger tidal shifts in general. And the canal opens into the narrow Gulf of Panama. This waterway bottleneck makes the tidal shifts even bigger. Now, when the ships are in the locks, they don't just float freely around. They're attached with steel cables to locomotives called mules, basically little trains that move along tracks on the lock walls. The mules pull ships into position and hold them steady while the chamber fills or empties. They're small but mighty machines, completely electronically powered. But they're just guides. The actual moving of ships 26 meters up and down the mountain range, that's powered entirely by gravity. No pumps at all. So how does it work? When a ship enters a lower chamber, valves are opened on the culverts, a series of giant pipes connected to the higher chamber. Then water flows down for 8 to 10 minutes. The water line rises in the lower chamber and falls in the higher chamber until the water levels match. Then the gate between the 2 chambers opens and the ship moves forward. The process repeats at each lock stage, lifting the ship incrementally until it reaches the lake. Going downhill works the same way in reverse. So that's how the Panama Canal works. All the energy comes from gravity, in the form of water flowing down through Gatún Dam. By the end, that water is in the ocean, and rivers are refilling the water level in Gatún Lake. Each time a ship passes through the canal's original locks, the lake loses about 200 million liters of fresh water. That adds up to billions of liters of fresh water lost every day. Usually the lake gets all that water and more from rivers fed by Panama's massive rainfall. In fact, when the canal was first built, too much water was the main concern. Engineers built massive spillways at Gatún Dam. During heavy rain, water is released back into the Chagres River below the dam, so the lake and the canal route don't flood. And on the Pacific side, there are spillways at the Miraflores Lake. Now that you understand the mechanics of the canal, let's talk about how the locks were built. The canal design called for 12 massive lock chambers. Each one is a waterway more than 300 meters long, 33 meters wide and deep enough to hold the largest ships of the day. It took 3.4 million cubic meters of concrete, more than had been used in any construction project at the time. All of it was poured in blocks reinforced with steel. The scope of the project required building an entire infrastructure, mixing plants, railways and a network of cables and cranes to position everything. Once that was done, the gates were put into place. These were their own engineering marvels. They are hollow structures, more than 2 meters thick, and they swing like double doors on massive hinges, opening or closing in just 2 minutes. The main culverts, the arteries of the lock system, are 5.5 meters in diameter and are built into the canal's concrete foundation. Smaller pipes, 20 for each chamber, branch off of the big ones. In turn, each of those has 5 holes, making a total of 100 holes in each chamber, for water to seep in or drain out. That allows water to enter evenly across the chamber floor, so there's no turbulence that could damage ships. Now, keep in mind that all of this was being built in areas that would soon be underwater. Because the canal was built inside of natural waterways, engineers had to design a way to keep the construction zones dry. They did it with temporary barriers, called cofferdams, essentially watertight walls made of earth, rock and steel. Once the cofferdam was in place, pumps sucked out all the water inside, creating a dry work area. As each section was completed, the cofferdams were removed and the water was allowed to flood the finished structures. The canal opened in 1914, at the start of a world war, but didn't open to most commercial traffic until 1920. Once it did, it radically reshaped world transit. But the engineering challenges didn't just end because the canal was built and open. Heavy rains still trigger landslides along the Culebra cut in modern times. In 1986, the canal had to be closed because of a landslide. Then in 2005, a landslide was detected early enough that dredging averted a full closure. These days, engineers can keep tabs on the land with robotics. Before, surveyors needed to analyze the land and look for any shifts. Now, robotic stations pivot and scan the land 3 times a day to detect any changes in the earth level. If there's any shift and indication of a potential landslide, canal authorities are notified immediately and can initiate dredging. But while heavy rains still threaten the canal, engineers these days are more concerned about a lack of water, because that impacts whether the canal works at all. You see, when Panama has a drought, the canal authority has to limit ship traffic to save water. Droughts have been a concern every now and then over the canal's history, but in recent years, droughts have gotten more severe, and solving the problem of too little water is not as straightforward as dealing with too much water. Dredging is one solution. It's always been part of the canal maintenance, but it can also be used to make Lake Gatún deeper and increase the canal's capacity. But the Canal Authority is also testing to seed rain clouds to increase the rainfall. It's a technology that's been used for decades in the dry American West, but it's a new idea to try it in tropical Panama. And this is how they do it. A small plane releases tiny particles in the clouds. Those particles become the nuclei for raindrops, which increases the amount of rainfall. And if squeezing more rain from the clouds doesn't cut it, there are even plans for new reservoirs. More on that in a bit. But first, let's talk about step 4, the recent upgrades to the canal. The Panama Canal had a great first 100 years, but the original locks weren't suited to 21st century shipping. A whole category had emerged for ships just small enough to fit through the canal. The so-called Panamax became a standard size for cargo ships around the world. If they didn't have to squeeze through the canal, they would all be larger. In 2007, Panama started to double the capacity of the canal. They added a completely new set of locks alongside the original ones, allowing the canal to handle ships with more than 2 times as much cargo. These new locks opened in 2016. They're called the Neo-Panamax locks, and they're big enough to handle most container ships and tankers used in global shipping today. Instead of swinging gates, the new locks use massive rolling gates that slide horizontally. The new gates all weigh at least 3,100 tons, nearly 5 times more than the original ones. And the new locks don't use mules. Instead, powerful tugboats guide ships into position. That's because Neo-Panamax ships are too large and heavy to be controlled by mules, and tugboats can maneuver them with more flexibility. The canal expansion has doubled its capacity and made it open to larger ships, but it has also brought new problems, like increasing its water usage. To help with that, each new lock chamber was built with 3 enormous water basins connected. When the chamber is emptied, 60% of the water is sent into the basins instead of flowing down to sea. The basins are positioned at levels between the upper and lower lock chambers. When the next ship needs to be raised up, water from the basins flows back in, reducing the amount of water drawn from Gatún Lake. This really is a genius system. It's all gravity powered, no pumps needed. Overall, the basin system cuts freshwater usage by 7%, even though these new locks are much bigger. It sounds like a small difference, but it adds up to billions of liters saved each year. However, these water-saving basins cause their own problems. When locks open to the ocean, salt water can enter the system. and the basins recycle water from the lower, saltier parts of the loch. Between the basins and the overall larger size of the Neo-Panamax locks, more ocean water is making its way up to Lake Gatún, and the lake is getting saltier. That's a big problem, because Gatún Lake directly provides drinking water for nearly 600,000 people. Ocean plants and animals are displacing freshwater ones as the water gets saltier. There's even concern that sea life could start to migrate between oceans through these Neo-Panamax locks. And given that these two ocean ecosystems have been separated for 3 million years, that could cause major trouble. On top of that, water shortages are still a big problem for the Panama Canal. In 2024, the canal's cargo tonnage dropped from 285 million tons to just 210 million tons because of a massive drought. So now, the canal has a new plan, an $8.5 billion expansion, to make sure that drought doesn't slow them down again. They're planning to build a whole new reservoir to supplement Lake Gatún. It's called the Rio Indio Reservoir, and it will add more water to the system and serve as a massive new drinking water supply. Some proposals even include pumping water back from the ocean into the lake, but that would require desalination at enormous cost. The canal is also planning new port terminals on both oceans to increase capacity. And finally, they're planning to build a pipeline that will run alongside the canal. That would allow for transport of energy products without tying up canal capacity. As we've seen, the Panama Canal is more than just a shipping channel. It's one of the greatest engineering achievements in human history. But will it keep up with growing ship sizes and climate challenges? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you want to try CyberGhost VPN, use our link for 84% off and 4 whole months for free. You can use CyberGhost on up to 7 devices at the same time and share it with family and friends. As always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.